Hey Fuggers, what's up? Today, we're looking at some new cards from Warrior, Paladin, Mage, and Demon Hunter. 12 cards were revealed by the Hearthstone Twitter today, and they're really exciting looking. But before we get into that, if you want to be a Fugger, go ahead and subscribe to my channel down below. And while you're down there, drop a like and a comment and hit that notification bell so you can stay up to date on all my new content, which I do release weekly. It's completely painless to do so and it costs you nothing. And you can always unsubscribe later if you decide you don't like my content. So please, all of your support means the world to me. Alright, let's get into some card reviews. Alright, so the first card we got here is Training Session. It's a warrior spell for 1 mana, and it says discover a taunt minion. If you play it this turn, repeat this. So this is a pretty good reload tool in the late game for like control decks. It's kind of reminiscent of Omega Assembly because you really want to play it in the late game to get full value out of it. It's probably not as powerful as Omega Assembly a lot of the time because the real strength of that was that there were a lot of big mechs that you could get, so you could just have some big threats to play. This, you're only able to get whatever you can play, plus like one last minion. So I don't know if it's going to be as good as Omega Assembly. It might actually be, though, because it does say repeat this, so you don't have to replay the cost of 1 mana, you just get the effect again. Theoretically, you can play 9 mana worth of taunts and then get like a 10-drop taunt. Like, that would be maximum value out of it. So it could be really good, but I just feel like, you know, you have to take advantage of it with your mana curve. It kind of doesn't always line up, so I feel like it's going to end up being about the same. And Omega Assembly is a pretty old card at this point, so I don't know if the power level still holds up for a card like that, especially because of how fast the game has gotten. I don't know how good pure control is going to be. This card does look like a decent option in that kind of deck, but I don't know if that kind of deck is going to be good, so that's going to hold a card like this back. Alright, our next card here is Hookfist 3000, a new pirate mech for Warrior. It's a 3 mana 4/3, and it has when your hero attacks, draw a card and gain 4 armor. Now, this is a really powerful effect. We've already seen a card like this in Rogue with the pirates as well, Cutlass Courier. And that card is really powerful in Wild. It was pretty good in Standard for a minute, but at the moment they just kind of lack the tools to make an aggressive pirate deck work better than their other strategies. But the effect is still really powerful, and I think in Pirate Warrior especially, it's going to be really strong, because Warrior lacks a lot of really good draw, even though the questline deck does make up for that by having some draw bundled in with the questline, and they have the 2 mana 2/2 that draws a pirate. But this is going to help a lot, especially in Wild, where you also have Ankar. You're going to be able to reload a lot of cards. And that's really going to help the deck a lot, because that's one of the problems with Pirate Warrior, is that they really gas out easily. So if you can deal with their Juggernaut, then you don't really have much to worry about, because they're kind of running out of cards. They don't have a lot they can play unless they get a top deck Smite or something. So, a card like this is actually really good for the deck. I don't know if it makes the deck good enough to see play again, and of course, the questlines are rotating soon, so it's only going to be changing anything in Standard for a short bit. I do think it's possible, though, that we see something come out of this in Standard. In Wild, I think this just probably makes the cut for Pirate Warrior lists, even though they've pretty much disappeared off the ladder. I do think that it's too little, though, to make Pirate Warrior good again in Wild. It's just going to be decent like it has been. Our last card for Warrior is a 6 mana 3/8 taunt, Undead, with Battlecry. If you have 5 armor, summon a copy of this. Now, I don't know if any of you remember this card from Saviors of Uldum. I don't quite remember the name of it at the moment. It's escaping me. But it was a 8 mana 3/8 taunt mech, and it had Battlecry summon a copy of this. Now, it didn't have a condition, but a discount of 2 mana is pretty significant, and that card actually saw meta play. Now, it has been years since that card was printed, but it is possible that this card is still just good enough. At 6 mana, 2/3/8 Taunt seems like a really good play, and I feel like Warrior easily has the 5 armor to meet this condition most of the time. I feel like this card will definitely see play in the meta. I don't know how powerful it will be, but you will definitely see it if you're playing against any sort of slow Warrior deck. Our next card here is Knight of the Dead for Paladin, a 3 mana 5/5 that has Battle Cry, deal 5 damage to your hero, and Mana Thirst 7, heal 5 health to your hero instead. Now, this is interesting because a 3 mana 5/5 is actually fairly powerful. It's not quite as good as a 2 mana 5/4 that we've seen in Demon Hunter, but that card was a very strong, so I'd imagine a 3 mana 5/5 with a lot less drawback would be a lot more playable. Dealing 5 damage to your own hero, as we see with the current Paladin list that's playing these self-damaging cards, doesn't turn out to be that bad of a drawback in Paladin, and you can easily heal that back with stuff like Hold the Bridge. And in the late game, it becomes a healing tool to heal up from your other self-damaging cards, so it just becomes really good at that. And in Wild, you have cards like Molten Giant to take advantage of with these self-damaging effects, and so that just makes the Thakal deck a lot more consistent when you don't draw Thakal. That deck hasn't really been meta for a while now, but it's possible with all these self-damaging tools that something actually is there and just nobody's looked at it yet. The next card up here for Paladin is a 4 mana 3/5 mech dragon that has Rush and Battle Cry. If you're holding a mech, gain Wind Fury. Now, this is an interesting twist on the mech synergy because it's a mech dragon, so it's not the typical mech synergy that you would see of having a mech on board. Instead, it's the dragon synergy condition, but needing a mech instead of a dragon, which I find pretty interesting. It's definitely on point flavor-wise. And I do think the card itself is actually pretty powerful. Dragon Paladin at the moment is a pretty serious contender in the meta. It's not that amazing, but it wouldn't take much more to push it into being a really solid deck. But this card might be able to make something happen with Dragon Paladin if you're able to fit some solid mechs into the deck, like the Colossal Minion and that 2 mana 2/2 that dredges. I can't quite remember its name. But stuff like that could maybe fit into a Dragon Paladin and maybe make something cool happen there. On the other side of things, it's also a mech, so it does work in the mech deck, which is still a thing. The 2 mana draw 5 card, Radar, is still a card, so you can still play that deck. It's very good, actually. It just doesn't see much play because it's kind of stale at the moment, and it doesn't do that well into a lot of the meta decks, if we're being honest. But it is still viable, and a card like this is definitely going to help it, at least some. We saw cards like Crab Rider be very strong, having Rush and Wind Fury, and this has 2 more attack. It is 2 more mana, but I feel like it's a very strong ability to attack 2 minions immediately with your Rush minion, and notably this is in Paladin, who has access to some hand buff cards that can make this a bigger threat when you play it, so you can take out some bigger targets on your opponent's board, completely flipping the game in your favor. Alright, our last Paladin card here is the Purator, a 5 mana 4/6 legendary card for Paladin that has Taunt and Battle Cry. If your deck contains no neutral cards, draw a card of each minion type. Now, flavor-wise, this card is pretty amazing. I love the name. It's a play on the old card Curator from One Night in Karazhan, and it's just an amazing flavor win. The Purator being for pure Paladin, the pure version of the Curator, it's just such a good pun. And the effect is also related, so it just makes so much sense thematically. And the effect is quite strong, by the way. Drawing a minion of each type means that if you're able to fit every type into your deck, which there are good minions of each type that exist in Standard right now, a lot of them are neutral, so you won't actually be able to make that work, but there is definitely like some undead. There's the Colossal is a good mech to draw. There's the Light Ray is an elemental. That's pretty amazing. Like, there's just some really good stuff. I'm sure there's a Naga that you can draw that would be really good. Like, it's just a really insane effect. If you can draw, like... If you draw 4 cards with this, that's amazing. Like, this guy only needs to draw 2 cards, and he's on par with cards that are good. If he's drawing you, like, 5 cards, you're just, like, getting insane refill. That's just crazy. So this card has insane potential. At the moment, I don't know exactly what cards you run to make this consistent, but I do know that if you can make it consistent, this card is incredible. It does require you to be running Pure Paladin, so that is a restriction on it. You won't be able to run any neutrals and draw them with this card. But it is possible that there's just enough cards in Paladin that are different types that you can just play this and draw a ton of cards, especially in Wild, where there's a lot bigger of a card pool, and a lot of cards that are just good minions that have a type. For example, a card like Hydrologist can be drawn with this guy, giving you a 2-mana 2/2 and a secret. That's pretty good value. Salet's Pride is another card that's in Wild. It's a beast for Paladin. That's a 3-mana 3/1 that draws you 1 health minions. That's also very strong for Paladin. So there are some really good things that you can draw with this card. I definitely think it's going to be good. And I do also think that it's going to be played in Reno Paladin because of the fact that it draws you both Zephyrus and Finley. Scratch what I just said. I realized after I said it that Zephyrus is actually a neutral minion, so that won't work. Next card up here is Spectral Trainee, a 3-mana 1/4 for Mage. It has the ability, after you cast a spell, deal 1 damage to all enemy minions. Now, we've seen cards like this before that whip the board in Warrior and Wild Pyromancer in Classic. And these cards typically work fairly well, but I don't know that Mage has seen much success with them in a long time. Mage is typically trying to burn the opponent out with effects like this, and the fact that this only hits minions makes it very limiting for Mage, in my opinion. So I don't know that this is going to be in a deck. It's possible that this is just good removal for some deck out there, and they want to play it anyway, just to get towards their win condition, but I definitely don't think you're trying to pop off with this and do 1 billion damage to the enemy board. That just doesn't seem like a valuable use of spells to me. So it's possible that this is just doing something where it just removes boards in like, not Big Spell Mage, because Big Spell Mage only plays big spells, but maybe something like there's the aggro deck that plays all of the cards that generate those arcane bolts. Maybe they play enough spells that this is good to just remove the board while you push face. That's something. That's an avenue for it. Overall, though, I think this card looks like a control card. It's shaped like a control card, but I don't think control wants anything to do with this usually. Because their spells are just too expensive to easily take advantage of this, or they're saving their small spells to do something big in the late game, so they really don't need an effect like this. Unless I'm just way wrong, I don't think this is going to see much play outside of that aggro mage list, which it will possibly see some play in. Our next card up here is Whirlweaver, a 3-mana 4/3 for mage with Battle Cry. If you cast a spell last turn, discover an elemental. Now this is another card that's playing with tribal synergy effects, where their conditions and their tags and stuff are swapped around. Here, it's playing with the elemental condition and the Naga condition, where you have to cast a spell, but normally a Naga says when you cast a spell while holding this. This one is if you cast a spell last turn, similar to how elementals will ask you to have played an elemental last turn. Now, I don't know how good this card actually is. I'd have to look at the elemental pool to be able to tell. Something tells me it's not going to be that strong, though. It's just a 3 mana 4/3. You have to have cast a spell last turn and not while holding this, so I feel it is weaker than the other Naga cards that activate when you cast a spell. Like Spell Coiler, I feel, is just a much stronger card than this. But we'll see. Maybe there's some sort of elemental you really want. Like maybe that 5 mana 4/5 that doubles your arcane spells. Maybe discovering him becomes an actually good strategy for making that deck consistent. Who knows? I don't personally see it, but it's possible there's something there. Alright, our next card up is Tear Reality, and oh boy, is this card insane. This card is a 4 mana mage spell that says, add 2 random mage spells from the past to your hand, they cost 2 less. Now, what's interesting about this is that you can get cards like Ice Block and Frost Nova, theoretically, in Standard. Now, I don't think that's going to be good or a problem because the spell pool in Wild is incredibly huge. The chances of finding something good are pretty low, I would think, because all of the really bad spells are the spells that used to be printed. Most of the time in new sets, they're printing useful spells, so all the spells in Standard are just a better pool. If you're discovering, you're not even discovering, actually, with this. You're just getting random cards from Wild. I feel like that's just not going to be good. As a Wild player who has played spell generation in Wild, I just don't think the Wild spell pool is strong for that sort of effect. But it will definitely lead to some frustrating and funny moments where the opponent generates 2 random ice blocks and wins because they got 2 extra turns of stall in addition to their solid alibis, and they just won the game through damage from their Varden pings or whatever. But most of the time, this is just going to whiff and give you some trash. Alright, our next card here is Shambling Chow. A 1 mana 2/3 with Rush for Demon Hunter, and it also has Death Rattle, deal 4 damage to your hero. So it's like a fast aggro card that's also dealing damage to you. We've seen a lot of this in Demon Hunter, or at least around Demon Hunter. It's possible the cards I'm remembering were neutral and they were just targeted towards Demon Hunter. But this card, I believe, is playable. I don't think it's that good. I don't think it's amazing, but I do think it definitely makes a fine addition to the aggro Demon Hunter list that was around before Soul Eater's Scythe became the thing that everyone was playing. Because I do think that aggro Demon Hunter deck is still strong. I do think cards like Bibliomite are still good. So I do think that this makes that deck, like, possibly a contender again. I don't think it's going to be near the best card in the deck, but I do think it improves the deck a little bit. Our next card here is Calamity's Grasp, a new 1 mana 1/2 weapon for Demon Hunter, and it has Death Rattle, add a random outcast card to your hand. Now this is a kind of similar effect to Tusk Piercer, only instead of drawing a card from your deck, it's generating one, so generally that tends to be worse. But the interesting thing about this card is that it's generating you an Outcast card. Now, a lot of people aren't aware of this and just assume that Outcast would be like any other keyword and would have a pool where it's not that reliable. But Outcast, interestingly, has a very few cards in the pool. So you can very consistently generate some very specific effects, especially because a lot of the Outcast cards have very similar effects. So if you're looking for something specific, it might just so happen that maybe 4 out of like 20 cards are exactly what you're looking for. That's pretty good odds for a card like this. And if any of you have been watching this channel for a while, then you would know that I have a deck in Wild called Outcast Demon Hunter that's been doing pretty well recently. I've actually almost made Legend with the list at this point. And this might be a good addition to that deck because sometimes you just gas out on things to do, and getting an extra Outcast card could be valuable. I'm not sure what I would cut for it, if I'm being honest, but it is definitely a consideration there. But it is possible that it's just too random and that it's not reliable enough. And our final Demon Hunter card and last card of this card review is Felscale Evoker, a 6-mana 5/7 Naga Demon for Demon Hunter that says if you've cast 3 spells while holding this, summon a different demon from your deck. Now, that word different there is very important because this card is very bad to get off of an effect like this, so the fact that it's summoning a different demon from your deck makes it a little bit less punishing. However, the big Demon Hunter deck isn't really a good deck at the moment. There's some sort of list in Wild that's like halfway decent, but it's not really good. And this card definitely doesn't make it any better because all of your best effects for big demons cheat stuff out of your hand. And this is also a demon. So when you play something like Sigil of Summoning and summon this card out of your hand, you're just losing the game. You need to summon your big demons every time. So running this kind of impairs your ability to. I don't know why they keep printing these effects for Big Demon Hunter that force you to run cards that have anti-synergy with your core game plan, because the deck is already bad. I guess they're afraid of giving it good tools and it becoming oppressive because it has cards like Illidari Inquisitor that goes face for 8 damage, or Taint Heart Tormentor, who restricts your opponent from playing spells. But it's never going to be a deck unless they give it something actually meaningful. In my opinion, the only way they're ever going to be a good deck is if they get a way to cheat things out on turn 4. Or earlier, but I don't think that's healthy for the game. But turn 4 is the last turn that you can cheat things out in a game and have it really be meaningful. If your entire game plan is big minions, if you're starting that on turn 6, your game plan is not good. And that's just going to always be true. The game is never going to be slow enough that that can be good. And it just hasn't ever been, especially in Demon Hunter, when you have way better strategies that are way faster, doing way more damage to your opponent. So I just don't see it ever happening unless they start bringing down the mana costs of these support cards. Alright, that wraps up our card review. Now on to star ratings. Training Session is a 2-star card. Hookfist 3000 is a 4-star card. Fleshshaper is a 3-star card. Knight of the Dead is a 4-star card. Goldwing is a 4-star card. Providing you can find enough minion types to support him, the Purator is a 4-star card. Spectral Trainee is a 3-star card. Whirlweaver is a 1-star card. Tear Reality is a 1-star card. Shambling Chow is a 3-star card. Calamity's Grasp is a 3-star card, and Felscale Evoker is a 1-star card. Well, there you go, Fuggers. That wraps up my review. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe, and drop a like, and a comment, and hit that notification bell so you can see all my new videos. Stay safe, everyone. Peace.